And it could be, we could go through a period of time where we have a government digital money alongside Bitcoin, and maybe some countries will launch a CBDC. I'm still not sure it happened here in the US. I'm not 100% sure in the UK. I know it exists in China. I know other countries are trying. Who knows? But for while we wait for Bitcoin to win, or while the race is happening, these other currencies will exist. So somebody listen to this, Lynn, they're still going to have to consider the relationship between what they hold in terms of, say, fiat and what they hold in terms of Bitcoin. Now, you've talked about developed markets seeing currency collapses. We've raised Venezuela today. We've talked about Lebanon. We've talked about Turkey. There's Argentina. There's plenty of other countries that are seeing high inflation and seeing currency collapses. But for the first time in my life, I feel like my domestic currency, the pound, is at risk of very high inflation. There's lots of weird things happening. The same here in the US. So just for somebody listening who might not understand, what is the kind of like worst and best case scenario that you're planning for with regards to what's happening with the dollar?
I use the 40s as a lot of a kind of description of what's happening now. And that was pre-war, right? So now it actually got closer, unfortunately, to that comparison, because now we're adding, additional kinetic war to the mix. But essentially, the last time that the developed world was as indebted as it is now on the sovereign level was the 1940s. And that was a result of all the imbalances during that period and then the large wars. And the way that was largely handled was massive currency devaluation, right? So interest rates would be held low because if you have 100% or 150% debt to GDP, you can't pay 10% interest rates on that. That's how you spiral into bankruptcy. So they just hold rates low, even if inflation's double digits. And that doesn't mean interest rates can't go up, but if you go up from 1% to 0% to 3%, while inflation's 8% or 12% or whatever the number is, that you're still getting devalued. Your share of that network is being diluted over time. My concern is that as we enter an environment of scarcer commodities, as we enter an environment of even just partial deglobalization, so just the lack of continuing of globalization, maybe hold on to the globalization we have, maybe claw it back to some degree. All of those adds friction and inflationary forces to the system. And so I think we have a lot more kind of inherently inflationary forces in the real stuff that we need to consume at the same time as the money system, the amount of the monetary inflation, so the number of new units being created, the percent increase per year is above average. Interest rates are super low. And because of the debt, they have trouble raising them. That's a recipe for ongoing currency devaluation. And then throughout the world, that can result in kind of massive political revolutions, protests.
Well, we're seeing this now. I mean, was
exactly.
it Peru I just saw last week? Protests. We've seen protests in Turkey. But we're seeing, It feels like this is a growing issue.
Yeah. And I think that generally whenever you have food prices spike and you have fuel prices spike, and especially when it happens faster than wages can adjust, because those things can happen over the course of a month, whereas it's not like everyone's wages just automatically tick up to match that during that month. That's when you get these massive protests because people can't put food on their table. They can't, power their car, their motorcycle, whatever the case may be. They just can't do the things they have to do in order to function in life. And that's when they hit their last straw and they go out and protest, and it can get pretty violent. And so that's the challenge of these decades of commodity scarcity and these decades of big monetary transitions. And there's no silver bullet. There's not something that someone can do to entirely eliminate risk. And there's going to be people that are really negatively impacted by this. But the way that people can protect themselves is by doing a careful assessment of where they're storing their assets. So are they storing their assets in things that can be devalued? Beyond, obviously you need some working capital, or at least most people, unless you're super tech savvy, you kind of optimize it to see, be on your own kind of like Bitcoin standard or something. But if, for vast majority of people, you need working capital, you need some kind of low volatility money for incoming spending, things like that. But your actual kind of reserve, to the extent that you can have them, you want to be very selective with what you own. And you want to look at things like scarcity. Can it grow long term? What's its value? What's the value of this thing going to be like 5-10 years from now, most likely, relative to other things? And then also, depending on where they are in the world, is it something they can self-custody or not? And that's actually, that's one of the rare aspects of money, is that unlike, I can't self-custody an equity. I'm on someone else's ledger. if I own an equity. Same thing with a bond. Real estate's obviously it's not portable. And so there's actually very few things that you can hold it and it's a bare asset that just you hold it outside of the system. There's no counterparty risk. And, gold has traditionally filled that role where someone can have a small amount of gold and it's just theirs. It's an asset that is not someone else's liability. So equities are technically liabilities of the company. Bonds are obviously liabilities. Currencies are liabilities of the central bank. All of these assets are some other entity's liability, except for these like fundamental bare assets, things like gold. And then now, over the past 13 years, we have Bitcoin, and it's more portable. You can transfer it with you pretty much wherever you go. You can use it for censorship-resistant payments if you need to. It has a variety of use cases, and so I think in addition to being an investment, in addition to being savings, it's also insurance. It gives you kind of that optionality in a way that other assets don't.
Amazing.